Mitch, welcome so much to our Facebook Live. I am so glad you could be here.
Thank you for the invitation.
All right, so before we go any further, I want to brag about you just a little bit and let everybody get to know you and who you are. And I do have a cheat sheet, so because there's a lot to remember about you. So Mitch Isaacs is the Executive Director of Shafer Leadership Academy. And what you guys really do, and I want you to discuss this a little bit more, but you're a leadership program development. You do, you like to impact civil engagement. And really what the Shafer Leadership Academy's mission and goals are, well, I don't know. Why don't you tell me what your goals are?
Yeah, so our mission, and like any not-for-profit, our mission is our North Star, is to provide inclusive leadership development opportunities so that individuals, organizations, and communities can reach their full potential. And like any mission, it sounds good, but how do you translate that into English, right?
Okay, well, wait, can we just comment on the fact that you did that without any notes?
Yes,
that's impressive.
Thank you. We do not-for-profit consulting, and one of the things we tell folks is that their mission should be their North Star, and they should have their mission memorized because it should guide all the decisions you make as a not-for-profit organization.
Okay, so I think we're good on our mission, but we don't have it down as pat as you do. So obviously I've just gotten some homework from this conversation. All right, so Mitch, the reason I wanted to have you on is because this has been, I think, an incredible year for you. It has not been what you thought it was going to be. It has totally changed. It just like on 42 different fronts. This has been a weird year. And I think a lot of it came from coronavirus. But what I think is amazing is how you have grown and changed and revamped your business. And I think you're going to come out even more profitable than you thought you were going to be at the beginning of the year, right?
Yes, that is correct. It has been a some pleasant surprises. I'll say that.
All right. Well, what have you learned in 2020? And do you want to talk about sort of where you were and where you are now?
Sure. Yeah, I think the contrast might help some folks. So as a not-for-profit leadership development organization operating out of Muncie, Indiana, and for those people who aren't familiar with Muncie, we're the home of Ball State University. If you don't know Ball State University, that was the collegiate home of David Letterman. So, and if you don't know David Letterman, I can't help.
I was going to say, if you don't know David Letterman, dude, we're just out.
So, we're a small rural community. And so primarily we provide leadership development programs until the pandemic here out of the facility where we have space. We operate out of a small business incubator. And so we were doing classes a few times a month. And then as you referenced some civic engagement events, and then some conferences and experience and appearances outside of Muncie. And that's what we were doing until about the middle of March.
And I think the important thing to note there is everything was in person.
Everything was in person.
Did you know that Zoom existed?
I had some idea of Zoom. I mean, Pam, our coach through CathCap, right away, like we started in January, started talking to me about virtual, and that was in the parking lot. It was low on the list of priorities. I'm like, hey, this in-person thing's working, and virtual felt like a far off thing.
Yeah, because I know one of your concerns about virtual was that you couldn't make eye contact. You couldn't see people. You couldn't read them as well. Were they following? Were they with you? Were they not?
Yeah, so much of what we do as leadership development is all about people. How do you relate to people? How do you work with people? How do you build genuine human connections to accomplish goals together as a team? And so we're all about connecting and relating. And so we didn't want to get into the virtual because I shouldn't say we didn't want to get into the virtual. We weren't eager to get into the virtual.
You weren't prioritizing it.
Yeah. Because so much connection was happening in person. And so when, Brooke, you asked me about what have we learned in 2020, one of the first things I learned was that virtual works. I'm still not convinced it's as good as in person, but the feedback we have gotten from our clients and our folks is it's good enough, and they're happy to take that trade-off of having a good virtual experience that's open to more people, because we're not limited by all the things you're limited by when you are in person.
Well, and we experience the same thing. So we're a virtual company. We always have been a virtual company. And the reason we went virtual is because we can touch more people in a shorter period of time. And yeah, I would love to be in every client's office every single week, but it's cost prohibitive. And so what we did by being virtual is we made what we do accessible to more people. And I think that you're kind of finding that same thing, right?
That is, a couple of months into the pandemic, we were surveying our membership about what to do in 2021. And we asked, the virtual programs provide the same amount of value, more value, or less value? And folks said the same, maybe a little bit less. And then the very next question, Brooke, in the survey was, would you rather send a limited number of people to in-person programs or an unlimited number of people to virtual programs? And the response, and so that's how it's really kind of been driving how we're going to do business in 2021 as well, is what we heard from our members is, yeah, we'd love to do in person. We prefer to do in person, but the virtual is good enough, and it lets us send more people through your programs. And
yeah,
so that's the first
huge
lesson I learned in 2021 was virtual works.
Fabulous. Did you learn any others?
I did. And it's funny because these are the things where I think back to my first conversation with you before I was even assigned. And I don't know if you remember, because I know you have so many conversations with folks, but it's when I was first referred to your company and we were thinking about hiring a new staff member, a salesperson. And I was reluctant and I didn't want to take the risk. And I wanted to basically try to do contract. And you said, look, you've got the money, hire a team member who's fully committed to you, take the risk, it will pay off. And that was right before I met with a committee of my board, and they said the same thing. And so we hired that person. They started in January, and that has led to one of my really surprising lessons, and one I feel a little bit of survivor's guilt about, is I have worked less in 2020, Brooke, than I did in any other previous year. And we've had more financial success than any year before it. And I think a part of the reason why was to take that risk and hire another staff member who had time to do the things I always wanted to do, but didn't have the time to do.
And here's the thing, we always want, and I know that we talked about this in that conversation, you always want to push work to the lowest paid qualified person, so that everyone is spending their time at their highest and best use.
Mm-hmm.
And you could do the sales, and you were doing the sales, but it was taking up a chunk of your time. And actually, if you could offload that, it opened up time for you to spend on your highest and best use. And that's where you start to make money, is when everybody is operating in that place of, this is where I belong, this is where I excel. And so you shouldn't feel guilty. You should feel guilty that it took you so long to do it. Sorry.
Yes. I only feel guilty that I know for so many people this pandemic, they haven't had that experience, right? And I think that leads to the third lesson, and it goes perfectly with what you were just saying. And that's the idea that now I need to think even more strategically and longer term, right? Like, before we do everything on an annual budget. And so I was thinking in terms of specific years, and yes, we have a 3-year strategic plan, but my goal was always to make money every year, because that was a metric that I thought mattered. And, Pam has really been pushing me about thinking not only long-term in terms of what my strategic plan is, but money. And hey, you know what, Mitch, if you take another big risk in 2021 and you lose money, and it's a calculated risk and you do it right, you might lose money in 21 and 22 and make it back threefold in 23. And so I'm learning that lesson.
Because you've got some supporters and an endowment behind you that
We do.
gives you a safety net. And when you have that safety net, you can take those bigger risks. You know, what's the expression? No guts, no glory.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to risk it for the biscuit.
Oh, I like that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is taking that step. It's going into the unknown. It's, you know, that can be stressful, but it's also where you find the reward.
Yes. Yes. And it's really allowed, to your point, has allowed me to focus on things that I need to focus on with less stress, which of course, you know,
It's counterintuitive, right?
it is. And less stress, of course, means clearer thinking and less emotional thinking, and thinking that's not born out of fear, but thinking that's born out of need a strategy. And so for somebody from a working class background, it's a very different way of thinking.
It is. So I am working with a coach right now, and we've been working together for a while, and she's so interesting. And I struggle with that same thing. If I'm not the first one in and the last one out, if I'm not setting the pace, if I'm not, you relate to, I think everybody watching this relates to that. Like, I got to be in there. I got to be doing that. And she's like, the problem is that you're running yourself down. And when you are running yourself down, doing those mundane tasks, working so hard, you don't have time to sit and think. And so one of the first things she told me to do is that I have to block out 3 hours. And she's like, you should be spending 3 hours every week with like blue sky idea time, where you're sitting and you're thinking about your business and where it goes and what you want it to do. And so I'm like, well, I could do better than once a month, because I mean, hello, like you and most of our clients, we're all overachievers. So like, dude, I could double that. I could do it every other week. So I missed the first 2 scheduled times and finally managed to do it the 3rd time. And it was really hard in the beginning to get past those little tasks, like, oh, I need to call this person and I need to do this and that, and get to that point where all of a sudden everything started to come into focus. And I could really think about the structure and what we're doing and how A impacts B. And
Yeah.
that's so valuable. But
You know, I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, no, I was just going to say, a lot of times we get caught up working in the business and we don't take the time to work on it.
You said something that made me laugh a little bit. You talked about overachievers and that whole, oh, I can do better than once a month. I had a moment like that with Pam, where she called me to the mat a little bit. I don't think she realized she did it, but she was showing me that graphic you all have about, you know, climbing the mountain and the cycles that businesses go through. And she told me where she thought that we were and where we could be. And then she said,
was it where you thought you were, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, it's like in the predicting phase, like, you know, and so.
Yeah, wait, hold on. I have to do a quick thing. So at CAFCAP, we believe that there are 4 mountains of growth, or 4 stages of your growth. And it is like, you figure out what your ideal is, and then you stabilize, and then you predict, and then you scale. And it's interesting because at each different mountain, you're encountering different problems and you're learning different lessons. And they don't necessarily have anything to do with revenue. They just have to do with the way your company is operating. And so, yeah, so you are out of stabilizing and into predicting. So go ahead.
And she was talking about scaling, and she said, you know, I don't know if you have the mentality for scaling. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, I think of myself as a big picture. I mean, I didn't say that to her at the time, but that's how I felt. I came back later and told her, like, you know, that really got my attention. And she didn't even think about it. It was just a passing comment to her. But her point was, and it connects to everything that you're just saying, is, yeah, Mitch, you're willing to work hard and do the work, but you also have to change your mindset to get to that next phase. And then you have to think differently. And that's what she meant. And so that's where we're at now. Is I'm getting ready to prepare for my 2021 budget for my board. And yes, it's that annual budget, but that's that annual budget that also has to keep the next couple of years in mind, and recognize that I have to think a little bit with a little bit more length and depth than maybe I had before.
Well, and you know, when we talk about those mountains, when we talk about going from envisioning to stabilizing to predicting to scaling, they are all great mountains. And when she said scaling may not be for you, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, you are in an awesome place. You know what's going to happen. You figured out your business model. You know what's going to happen with your revenue. You know what's going to happen with your expenses. It is all very predictable. You know, if you do this, you will grow that amount. And that is, I mean, Mitch, I can't tell you how many people want to be in that position.
Yeah.
And there is nothing wrong with sitting on that stabilized mountain for the next 15 years, because all you do is tweak it. You increase the sales a little, you make it a little more profitable, and you reap the benefits. And that's okay.
Yeah.
So we don't believe in growth for growth's sake.
Yeah, but I like to grow.
I
like the climb. I like the climb.
Yeah, the climb is fun. All right. So tell me what you're going to do differently in 21 based on these lessons that you learned in 20.
Well, going back to lesson 1, virtual works. We've already been meeting with so we operate off a membership model. And so we have basically said to folks, we're going to be all virtual in 2021 until we're not, and we don't know when that's going to be. And so we had to reorganize our model and our pricing structure based off of that. And so we've got about 30 members, and we've probably met with close to 10 of them and explained that no one's blinked. And the funny thing is, Brooke, is that actually we're going to charge people more because they're getting, and so that's been really interesting, is folks who can't go up, who we said, well, according to the new model, you should really be up 2 levels. A couple of them come back and said, well, we can't do 2 levels, but is it okay if we only just go up 1? I'm like, I'm sitting there thinking, I'd be happy if you stayed put, but sure, go up 1, right?
Oh, and sometimes it's dangling that thing in front of them.
Yes.
Sometimes it's dangling the scaling mountain and seeing what happens.
Exactly. So, that's how we're implementing the virtual works lesson. The idea that I don't have to do all the work myself. I am, it's almost back to a year to the day, thinking about bringing on a 4th team member to help out with the virtual. It's somebody who we've hired part-time for some project work, who I think we're probably ready. And I was just talking with one of my staff members about it before we got on this call, about bringing her on full time. And that directly connects to the 3rd lesson about changing your mentality and taking risks. And hey, if we bring her on, and even if that means that we lose some money next year, we're fine because we've got good cash. And in the long term, it's going to benefit the organization.
Absolutely. And, at the end of the day, the only way we're going to make money is by hiring more people and delivering more services.
Right.
I mean, there is only so much that you can do. Now, I know that you got a really big client recently, and I'm not going to say who it is. And I'm pretty sure they're not headquartered in Muncie, Indiana. Though I could be wrong.
They're not. They are a Fortune 500 client, company, our first Fortune 500, actually. Tyson Foods.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if we could say it. Yeah. So Tyson.
Yeah, we can say it. We've done a press release and everything. So
awesome.
Yeah, we're telling that story. You better believe it.
Every chance we get. All right. So you've got this huge client, Tyson Food. They are not in Muncie, Indiana. Would you have gotten them prior to this, prior to the virtual? Or do you think that contributed?
Not at this level. I don't know that we would have gotten them at this level, because we were actually had a relationship with them. We'd started a relationship with them before the pandemic, and they were getting ready to sign right before the week before the pandemic. They were going to sign at 1 level for some frontline supervisor training. Pandemic hit. We waited. We came back months later and said, hey, we've been doing this virtual thing. Do you want to try it virtually? Same kind of deal, right?
Yeah.
And then they said yes. And this is where, the pandemic helped us. they came to us and said, well, what if we propose something else? We've gotten some workforce development dollars through the CARES Act. So, federal government gave Indiana workforce development CARES money, and they had a relationship with that organization, and it basically increased our deal with them by a factor of 5.
Holy cow.
Yes. But it was a big ask. We'd been doing virtual for a couple of weeks at that point, months, I guess. But
we
it's
tried
20,
it twice. It seemed to be working. Sorry.
right. They're like, look, we can pay you. I mean, I don't think they
Threw
knew
out
this.
the number.
We're going to pay you more than anybody's ever paid you before, but we need you to do 24 hours of virtual supervision with our staff or training with our supervisors for 6 consecutive weeks. And,
Holy cow.
holy cow.
That is a lot of content. That is 3 solid days a week for 6 weeks.
It is. And it's the same content. It's 6 different groups. So yeah. And so you're doing the same content over and over again, and it builds to that 24 hours. So 4 hours a week for 6 different groups, same content. So that's when we hired somebody on part-time to do the virtual program management, to help our program director who facilitates the content.
Yeah.
And then we developed some other new tools for them that we had never developed before. So we developed some programs and tools and services, and brought in some staff we hadn't had before, specifically for Tyson. And it's improved our overall operations, given us some great ideas on innovative things to do. And of course, we hope sets a template that if they're satisfied at the end, they're going to say to Tyson Corporate, hey, these people are great and they can do virtual work. And then we can do that hopefully with other plants around the country.
Yeah. Well, and you said something that was great. You talked about you developed some new things from them.
Yes.
And a lot of times when we develop new things for one client, we can then take it and implement it. Yeah. We don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
Create it once, and then.
Since it was all virtual, we developed a resource. We developed a page off our website just for them. All the resources were virtual. They could access all the trainings through a password protected link. If any of their staff had any questions or concerns or feedback for us, they could put that anonymously on the resource page. And so we've already gotten feedback that's not only helped us tweak programming, but shared testimonials already with their plant leadership. And so that's something that's easily repeatable. If any other client wants a similar service, the template's there.
That's great. Yeah, we're starting to build out kind of a learning platform. Mm-hmm. And yes, you heard it here first. There's so when I got my office, I made sure that one wall in every office was painted with this stuff called Remarkable, which takes an ordinary wall and turns it into a whiteboard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it's a clear coat. So in the conference room, the wall is blue, like all the other walls in the office, but it's a little shinier because it has that coat on it. So as I point over here in my office on my giant entire whiteboard wall, I've got the drawings of what our learning platform is going to start to look like.
Yeah.
And
nice. My wife does chalkboard paint in our house, so I'm familiar with the concept. She loves it.
Yeah, it's awesome. I was a little concerned. So my nephew was here on Monday, and I gave him markers. I'm like, draw on the wall. Only this wall, but draw on the wall. I thought, I'm going to send him home, and the 3.5-year-old's going to get markers and draw all over his mother's walls, and then I'm going to be big trouble.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. So, nephew stories. And I always lose my place because, he's so cute. Okay. So you have been working with Pam for about 9 months now, right?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about how working with a CFO has changed what you're doing. And I'm going to give you a couple little prompts here, because normally when we talk to people and we talk about having a CFO, they think that all they're going to do is look at their books. Mm-hmm. The end. Mm-hmm. And so you spent too much money. Has that been your experience? Like,
No,
yeah.
no.
Okay,
We
good.
started there, but we didn't dwell there. We started with the books and that makes sense. I would have been surprised if we didn't. And she gave some great suggestions
Mm-hmm.
that have helped, particularly in reporting to my board, actually. But most of our time is in strategy and thinking differently. And the thing about Pam, and I know you know this, she's a straight shooter, right? So I don't have to wonder like what she thinks about something. She's going to tell me what she thinks about it. And so,
All of our CFOs are like that, by the way.
yeah, it's a good quality, right? I mean, that's what you need in it, because part of the coaching relationship, and we do some coaching, for leadership, is you need somebody to be that truth teller. You need somebody to hold up that mirror. You need someone to provide that perspective. And that's often what she does, in some of the ways we've already discussed. And then she's also just looked for ways to be helpful. When we had to switch virtual, when we decided to go virtual 2 weeks later, we had to launch our first virtual program, right? For our membership
So
and our public.
you had oodles and oodles of planning time.
Yeah,
That wasn't a problem.
2 whole weeks. I think
you only needed a third of that.
that's right. Yeah. I think maybe a little more than a month later, she was a facilitator, right? Like, I was trying to rebuild my entire calendar and find people who can deliver this content. And, to your point, since CathCap is a virtual company, she was already comfortable in that space. So she came in and facilitated a great session. So, often, there's some work on the books, and then there's some work on strategy. And then the other thing I appreciate about Pam, she looks for ways to be helpful.
Mm-hmm. It's such an interesting relationship that we have with our clients. So I think one of my very first clients was like maybe our third. I was talking to him and he said, I'm going to have to show you my underwear drawer. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, what? He's like, the underwear in the back of the drawer that has, his words, not mine, the skid marks and the holes in it. I'm like, yeah. He's like, I'm going to have to show you that. I'm like, huh?
A little too much honesty.
He's like, well, metaphorically in my books and like my money thing. I was like, yes. You have to show me your money equivalent of your underwear drawer. Please, God, don't show me your actual underwear drawer. But it is like, we have to get in there. We have to get intimate. We have to understand you and your business. And then, yeah, we're there to make it better, whatever it is. And whether it's helping you facilitate something, whether it's helping you get a loan, whether it's very affectionately whacking you upside the head and saying, Mitch, get over yourself and hire this person. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. We've got to be honest and we've got to be pretty forthright about it. Like, and there's no judgment around it. And in fact, that's one of our core values.
There's been no judgment. And I'm glad you mentioned the loan because I can't believe I forgot about it. She was so helpful with the PPP loan and the economic disaster. Because for me, one of the things we do at Shafer is we kind of provide gathering for local not-for-profits. And so many of them were like, everybody was freaking out in March and April, right?
Everybody.
And we became almost de facto experts on the PPP and EIDL process. And it's because of things I learned from Pam. Mm-hmm. And, that right there, I mean, if we had done nothing else with CathGap and you got no other value, the fact that she helped us but the fact that she, helped, like I felt so much more comfortable and with those, because, everybody had questions. Right. And so,
I know.
Yeah, I know. Who am I telling? Of course, you know. It was such a comfort and help in such an uncertain, kind of scary time, that it was, tremendous value. And now we have more cash than I expected. So
isn't that nice?
It is nice.
It's nice. The PPP process was interesting on our side because here we had clients that wanted information. There wasn't a lot of information. The information changed day to day. I can remember Pam texting me and saying, turn on your TV right now. And, we were in heavy lockdown. I was working from my kitchen table. So I ran over, turned on the TV in the kitchen and started watching. And there the president was announcing that the PPP was going to open on Monday. And it was Thursday. And the interest rate was going to be 1%, which before that it had been 0.5%, or it was going to be 0.5%. And before that, we thought it was going to be 2% and all this stuff. And I'm like speed dialing my banker. And she was on the PPP loan committee for this rather large regional bank that we use. And I'm like, Brandy, is this really what's happening? She's like, oh my God, how do you know stuff? The SBA didn't even talk about that on the call that I got off of like an hour and a half ago. I'm like, the president's like in front of a podium.
That's how we've learned about a lot of stuff this year.
Yeah, I know. So like it was all changing so fast. And finally we're like, okay, here's what's going to happen. The most of the team sat on a Zoom call like this and filled out everything for my company. And let me tell you, so you've got 8 people on there. There were 8 opinions. No, don't put that number, put this number. But it was great because as a team, we worked through it all. And so we could say, all right, now it's going to ask for this, and then it's going to ask you for this, and do this and don't do that. And we guinea pigged ourselves really because we needed to. And yeah, there were a lot of questions. I had the Consumer Bankers Association on a couple of weeks ago. And this is one of the amazing things. And I don't even know if you realize this yet, but we're going to fill out your PPP application for you. Did you know that?
No, but it's wonderful news.
Yeah, you do not have to fill that out. The Consumer Bankers Association estimate that it's going to take, I think they said 100 hours for the average business to fill out their PPP forgiveness.
Wow.
So when you talk about us being worth it to get the loan, oh baby, you're going to love us to get the forgiveness.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Well, that's great news. That's great news. I'll take it.
We're not going to leave you out there to panic and
lost in the wilderness. Yes.
That's right. No lost in the wilderness. All right. So I want to go back to your company a little bit. Is that all right? Can we talk about it a little more?
Sure.
So beginning of 2020, you had how many employees?
2 full-time and one kind of part-time.
Did that include you?
Yes.
All right. So you, one other full-time person and a part-time person.
Yeah.
And today you have
3 full-time, a consultant that's part-time, and then a virtual programs manager that is, well, right now full-time during the Tyson project, at least.
Okay. So you doubled.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a down year.
Yeah.
With more revenue than you've ever had.
Yes.
With more profit than you've ever had.
Yes.
And you have more cash than you've ever had.
Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't waste a good crisis, did you?
Can I bring you to my board meeting in November? Because that's when they're going to determine like bonuses and compensation for next year. So if you can just go there and say all that, I'd appreciate it. So.
Dude, this is on film. You can just, if I need to help you edit out just that one section,
just that section right there. I think
right there, just from here to here. Absolutely. I think it's amazing. I think that in the 3rd week of March, you were in a really bad place.
Yeah. The one time where, Pam thought I didn't like her is she said to me, you need to be prepared for the worst. You might need to think about letting go this guy who's been killing it, who you just hired in January. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I was in that headspace for, I don't know, I was really upset and angry for probably about a week, not necessarily at her, but just at the circumstances. Right.
Yeah.
And obviously it didn't work out that way, but that was a real fear for a while.
Yeah. Well, you want to know what the back conversation was? Pam calling me going, Mitch is still resisting going virtual. He's got to go virtual. If he doesn't go virtual, it's over.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad you did. And that had to have been a really hard decision for you to totally change your entire business model like that.
Necessity is the mother of invention, right? and
Yeah, it is.
and I tell you, Brooke, it really has surprised me when we did that in our community, the kudos that we received, that we just went out there and just did it, right? Like we didn't know or think it, we weren't comfortable with it. The first time I facilitated, and I facilitated for a lot of different audiences of very small size and some of them of reasonably large sizes. And I'm very comfortable in front of a crowd. But the first time I facilitated virtually, I was nervous because it was new. And what I found, one of my other lessons learned, I guess, is people were they gave us grace, because I think there was a lot of grace given during
I was going to say they're pretty forgiving.
But just the amount of people who were like, wow, we're so impressed that you went for it. We're so impressed that you just tried it and you were willing to do it. And you were still trying to meet your commitment to us as your members and supporters, and that you didn't just give up and you were willing to get out there. And it positioned us as not only leaders in that space in our community, but for our funders and supporters as a group that was going to continue to work no matter what happened. And the goodwill, that is generated continues to pay dividends.
Yeah. I want to go back to what you said of you're an experienced presenter, you present all the time, and then you get on and you do it with technology. I got a call from somebody recently and they're like, oh my gosh, I totally love your Facebook Lives. And I'm so intimidated to be on camera and do that. And I'm like, and I was like, you do things by yourself all the time. She's like, yeah, but I don't know. And I was like, oh, dude, having a guest on's a total crutch. Now all I have to do is have a conversation, because yeah, you have that same kind of, I can get up in front of any room. You want to put me on a giant stage with lights and all that? No problem. Mm-hmm. But the first time you go on, you're like, hi, I'm Brooke and we're going to do a Facebook Live. And you look like a deer in the headlights, right? And you learn and you do it, and it gets easier. And I think part of it, you're a great presenter to begin with. So like you have the skills, but people are realizing that it's not quite as easy as you think. And they are giving you a ton of grace. And I love that, because now I found that it's totally fun. I have found when I do presentations, I like to have a moderator, because that makes it easier for me. I don't love the presentations where I give them and I can't see anybody on it.
No.
Where I'm like,
no,
talking to my camera for an hour and a half.
People turn off their cameras and that they're not engaging. That was why I was nervous, is that I feed off people. I feed off energy, right? And so it's hard to get that through a screen. But that's one of the other things that I think I've learned through this is it's a blessing and a curse, the technology. And I don't know how you feel, but it's great that we got on Zoom first and we did all that stuff, but now everybody's done Zoom and there's a bit of Zoom fatigue. So now one of the things this person we hired part-time, full-time, is she went out and spent the summer benchmarking what other people are doing in the virtual space and checking out their tips and tricks, because we know it's hard to engage people in this environment. And so we're looking for new platforms, new techniques, new ways of getting people's attention, because Zoom isn't going to do it anymore. And if we're going to capture people's attention in a world that demands their attention is 30 places and they can turn off that camera and check their email while you're presenting, then you're going to have to pull out a bag of tricks and you're going to have to do things to engage them. And that means you have to constantly have to keep looking for ways to keep people.
Yeah. What's next? When this all started, I'm in EO, and there's some great EO Facebook groups. And so, you troll through them and someone's like, what do I do about lighting? And what do I do about this? And so, I listened, and as we went along, I'm like, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to buy that, I'm going to add this. And then I was on a podcast. This will totally crack you up. I was on a podcast for a guy in England, and he sent out these requirements of your microphone and all of this, more intense than what NPR requires you to have. So like huge. So I have that, and you're going to laugh. I'm going to show you. I've got a big, huge, like official real microphone that I keep hidden. And somebody sent me an email yesterday and said, your Facebook Lives look really good. What are you doing? I'm like, oh, well, I have this Logitech Brio thing, and I've got this microphone, and I've got this. And I realized that, like, using that community and listening to them for the past 6 months, I've built a good setup. And I think what you're talking about is incredible. I'm still stuck on Zoom. Like, what's that next platform? Where's that next? Like, where do we go next? And I'm going to kind of rely on you for that.
I'll give you a quick tip, a hot tip for you and everybody listening.
Hot tip. All
right. We're looking at next is called Remo, REMO.
Okay.
The person we hired knows the founder, and it's super cool. It's a virtual networking space. So imagine in your mind's eye a diagram for like a wedding reception or an event, and you can see that diagram of tables and chairs. Mm-hmm. When you log in, you're placed at a table just like that with people, and then you can pick up your icon and move to another table. And then when the presenter wants to speak to the whole group and present to the whole group, it's great.
Turns off the tables?
The sound is a clinking glass.
Oh, awesome.
And so we're actually investigating doing a networking event to try that out, because we know there's Zoom fatigue. And so it's a super cool platform. I'd encourage you and anybody else listening to check it out. Don't tell anybody in my area about it, because we want to be the ones to bring it to East Central Indiana. But it's
very specifically East Central Indiana.
Yeah, you all can have the rest of the country. Just give me that, okay? So
there's there were two men here in Fort Worth, and one of them was all about Fort Worth. Everything had to be Fort Worth, Fort Worth, Fort Worth, Fort Worth. And one of his friends finally looked at him and very famously said, "You take Fort Worth, I'll take the rest of the world."
Yes. Well, Texas is a world of itself anyway, right? So.
Well, yeah. So it was great. All right, Mitch. If people want to learn more about what you do, how do they get in touch with you?
Shaferleadership.com, SHAFER leadership.com. Check it out. The website's getting ready to change, doing some new branding. So maybe by the time you hear this, that'll launch. We've really kind of stripped it down and simplified it. Mm-hmm. And so you can check out our programming there, click the calendar, see what we have to offer. And as we've discussed, we are virtual now. So no matter, I tease about East Central Indiana, but if you're in, Eastern Texas or Eastern Alaska or Western Nevada or wherever you are, we'd love to have you come and engage.
That'd be awesome. All right. Any parting words of wisdom?
Well, I think that what 2020 has probably taught all of us, and certainly what my time with CAFCAP is teaching and reinforcing me, is that don't be scared to grow. Don't be scared to change. Don't be scared to be flexible, and that life is not a Google map where you input a destination and follow very clear and explicit instructions to get to where you want to go. It's much more like a compass, and that tells you one important thing is, are you moving in the right direction? And so I just want to thank you, Brooke, that I'm so glad that we got connected a year ago and that you connected me to Pam, because I feel like things at Shafer Leadership Academy are really moving in the right direction.
Well, you guys are doing an awesome job and doing incredible things. And it is a pleasure to work with you and learn from you, because we do learn a ton from you. So,
thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Thanks for coming on.
All right. Have a good afternoon.
You too. Bye-bye.